Good evening. Welcome to Talk Ottawa. Well, the provincial election is behind us, but there are many issues still to discuss as we get ready for the resumption of the legislature. We're joined tonight by three local MPPs who were re-elected on October the 6th. Joining us from the riding of Ottawa-Vanier is the Liberal MPP, Madeleine Meilleur. From Ottawa Centre, Liberal MPP, Yasser Naqvi. And from the riding of Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington, Conservative MP Randy Hillier. Welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations on being returned to Queen's Park to all of you. So let me ask you your thoughts on the results of the election. And Randy Hillier, maybe you can go first. What message do you think was sent to your party in the results of this election? And then I'll ask our Liberal representatives the same question.
Well, I think there's two very key messages that were delivered. First off, has been the people have lost confidence in Dalton McGuinty's government. He's now in a minority position for the first time. He's gone from a very significant majority government to a minority position. For the PCs, this is the first time in 3 elections that we have actually significantly advanced, and we lost no incumbents. So good on Tim Hudak, rookie, or is referred to as a rookie. He's been
rookie as leader.
Yeah,
first
he's
election
been
as leader.
Leader for 2 years now, and he's moved the yardsticks farther than the previous 3 leaders. So good on Tim Hudak. I think it's going to be very interesting times. What happens next? There's lots of. This is the first time we've had a minority government in Ontario provincial politics since the mid '80s, and first time that Dalton McGuinty is going to have a government with a very short leash on them. So interesting times ahead.
Was one of the messages sent on election night that Ontario wasn't ready for a progressive Conservative government?
I think, there's we'll leave all the pundits with their expertise. My view is that we didn't offer as much change as what the electorate was looking for. That's my personal view. I think the appetite for change was greater than what we read into it when we released our platform back in June.
So are you saying the platform was, as some people have said, too similar to the Liberals' platform?
I don't know. I wouldn't use the term similar, but it wasn't as substantive a change of direction that people were vying for. I think that that gives it merit when we see the very low, the lowest ever voter turnout in Ontario provincial politics, below 50%. And that generally indicates that the change that was being sought after was not being offered up.
All right, well, we can talk more about that in a few minutes about what type of changes you think Ontario wanted, but let's get your thoughts on what you think the message was for the Liberals. You won the election, but you don't get a majority and you lost a number of seats. So what do you think the voters of Ontario were saying to you?
Well, first of all, you have to look at where we were in July and where we end up on October 6th. I think that the message was we want leadership, we want stability, and we want someone with vision. And we want someone who is positive and give us hope. I think that the Conservative went very negative, and I asked my neighbor what was in the Tory platform. They were not able to tell me what was in their platform because it was they were going too negative. So, but we had a good platform, and we had something to offer to Ontarians, and also they knew what to expect because we have been there for 8 years.
So again, it was a victory, and as you say, if you compare it to where you were in the polls in July, it was a big improvement over that number, but it wasn't, I don't think anybody could describe this as a resounding victory since it's not a majority government and since the popular vote was actually quite close.
Well, I think you have to focus on what the issue in this election was. I disagree with my friend Mr. Hillier that issue was changed. The issue was economy. As I was going knocking on doors in my community in Ottawa Centre, people were talking about jobs, people were talking about strengthening the economy. And the message is very clear by Ontarians. They want a strong Liberal government with experienced leadership to deal with these tough economic times. They could not put trust in Mr. Hudak or Ms. Horwath, for that matter, but they trust Dalton McGuinty, who has demonstrated over the last 8 years as a strong leader who is willing to take those tough decisions to ensure that we continue to grow our economy in these tough economic times and create new jobs. And I think that was a very clear message. Focus on the economy, and Dalton McGuinty is the guy, and his team is the team who can do it.
But just to be clear, and I mean, I think that we're all guilty, politicians, members of the media, we're all guilty of treating the result as one decision as opposed to 4 or 5 million decisions that individuals made across the province. It wasn't, we didn't all get together and establish a consensus and say, we want a minority government or we want this, and people voted for different things in different places. But you lost several percentage points in the popular vote, and you lost 19 seats in the legislature. So is there a message in that? Should the government look at that and say, we need to listen to that message?
I think the way I read the message is the message is to focus. You know, I think the people said that your focus as a government at this time should be the economy, and we need you to be very laser vision about that, and really saying strong leadership is required at these tough times, and Dalton McGuinty is the guy who has demonstrated that he can make those important decisions that are needed to be made. And I think it was a huge reaffirmation of the policies the government has taken, be it in the area of green energy and the jobs that are being created as a result of it, investments in our healthcare and education, and the result in better, improved quality of services. Those are the things that I think has been taken into account. I agree with Madeline saying that, you know, not that long ago, a few months ago, everybody thought this was it. There will be a Conservative majority government, and we've had many of those conversations in media about that. But in the end of the day, people went for experience.
But there is a message in there, whether or not you want to recognize the message. The message is on a number of fronts. The Liberals lost in their popularity vote. They've dropped about 4% in the popular vote. The PCs increased by about the same, about 4%. And we also had about a 4% reduction in voter turnout overall. So there are messages in there. And look at the regionalism within the province now. The Liberals were decimated in Northern Ontario. They are on a lifeline at best in rural Ontario. I think there's one rural seat now being held by the Liberals. That is all progressive Conservative territory. Everywhere where there was a industrial wind turbine proposal, the Liberals lost. An absolute condemnation of the Green Energy Act in the places where those proposals would be actually situated. So there are powerful messages in there. Of course, the economy was and is a big ticket item, high on the priority of most people in the province. And there's jobs and the economy are so important. I believe that they recognize that the Liberals and the job losses that we have experienced in this province, the falling into have-not status, all these things are very important. My view of it is they were more desirous of greater change to get off that track where our economy and our jobs have been trending downward.
If that's the case, do you look at this, as I think many progressive Conservative supporters do, as a lost opportunity, this election? Was this a missed opportunity when there was such appetite for change that the Conservatives didn't capitalize on it?
Well, it certainly would have been nicer for progressive Conservatives, and I think it would have been better off in the long run for a Conservative majority. But democracy is never wrong, Mark. Democracy has never been wrong. The voters have cast their ballots. We've tallied the votes. We can see what the results are. And they have lost confidence in the Liberals, but they have not yet seen that level of confidence to put in the Progressive Conservative Party. And you look at those regional breakdowns, Dalton McGuinty will have to climb down off his Green Energy Act. There's without a doubt. And he's also demonstrated that he will do things to protect the riding, like the climb down on the power plants in Mississauga and Oakville, do anything to retain those seats.
So while we're talking about regional messages, let's talk about why there wasn't a Progressive Conservative breakthrough in the Toronto area. Rob Ford managed to achieve a historic win in Toronto in the mayoralty race less than a year ago. The federal Conservatives made a breakthrough in the Toronto area. Why didn't this Progressive Conservative provincial
I might ask, why didn't Dalton McGuinty make a breakthrough in rural Ontario, or why didn't he hold on to his position in northern Ontario? The North has been
you did address that. You did address that already, so I'm asking you the other side of it.
Why we didn't? I think I already addressed that earlier. The appetite for change was greater, and we did not recognize just how great that change was. When we launched a change book back in June, we were reading the electorate in June. The appetite had grown by October 6th.
So what would bigger changes have been? What would you, if you could have written change book on October the 5th, what would it have said?
Well, I think what we're into now is, where do we go from here? What's the province going to do now? And I think that's the most dynamic period of time that we've had in provincial politics, is what comes next. What will Dalton McGuinty do to, we've heard all kinds of discussions, all kinds of talks of purchasing a member to get that majority government that he was denied, using either the Speaker's chair or a cabinet post to basically buy a majority.
But you heard that from your member, not from us.
No, I've been hearing it from quite a few.
No, this is the interesting thing.
Yes.
All these speculations
exactly.
about speakers or a member moving, we keep hearing it from the Conservatives.
Yeah.
There's no such
and
conversation.
Dissemination from the North. I don't think that we have been disseminated. We have Northwestern Ontario. You have one seat in
Two in Northern Ontario.
Oh yeah,
yes.
One that is almost in Toronto, but they consider that as Northern Ontario. But
well, we don't have time in this segment, but I do want to talk about what is likely to happen when Parliament resumes. Let me ask you this though: is there any question about the future of Tim Hudak, the leader of the party?
No. He's demonstrated, like I said, he's moved the yardsticks farther and further in a shorter period of time than any other leader in the last 3 elections. He's on solid ground. But the
caucus supports him?
Oh, absolutely.
The party supports him? Does he have to face a leadership review, a standard one?
That's a standard in our Constitution that after every after every election where we don't gain power, there is a leadership review.
You didn't want to use the word defeat or loss there.
Well, you always want to think before you speak, Mark.
And fair enough on that, but you don't anticipate any difficulty for him in clearing that hurdle?
Listen, Tim's a very sharp, intelligent, focused individual. Caucus and Tim will review and analyze and evaluate this election, and he's going to be a much stronger, much better, a much more effective leader. And I think when this minority government falls, if Dalton doesn't get to bribe a member to come over, when it does fall, the next election will see Tim Hudak as premier.
They forgot that we just had a minority federal government, Tory federal government for a while, and so to
different
say
dynamic. In the Feds, you had 3 parties. Here we have three opposition parties. Here we have 2 opposition parties, and one of the federal parties, of course, was the Bloc. And the 3 could never get their act together. Here you're seeing provincially, the NDP and the Conservatives are both very, they're looking forward to working with this, but they're also seeing the key messaging coming out of the Premier's office right now. For example, when Andrea Horwath offered up to have a leaders meeting just a complete demonstration of arrogance once again by
So you
Dalton
will
McGuinty,
see the
that
negative
there will
tone
not
continue.
be there will not be any
Yeah.
discussion. He's going to pretend to run this government as a majority government, and I think that's because he's got some
You
things in
just
the
got
works.
a message from the public that, you know, they didn't want Tim Hudak there. So I
Well, they
guess,
also didn't want Dalton there.
right? You know, but
Well,
we
they
won
elected
with
him
a
as
very
premier.
strong.
No, they didn't elect him as premier.
Yeah.
He has a minority government. He has to demonstrate and carry confidence in the House.
You would
Right
have
now, the
loved to
two
be in
opposition
our
parties have greater
shoes.
number of votes.
All right, so we'll pause there, and when we come back, we'll talk exactly about how things are going to work when Parliament resumes. We'll be right back. So let's take a look ahead at the next session of the Ontario Legislature and what we might expect. I know that Premier McGuinty has already said there will be a fall economic update, that Dwight Duncan will continue as finance minister. What can we expect in that update? And I think there's a sense among residents of Ontario and even among many politicians that the economic climate is even different now from what it was at the beginning of the campaign, perhaps if you go back to the spring. So what can we expect from that?
I think the premier was very clear when he instructed the finance minister to provide an update. Is that we need to understand where things are at right now. Things are changing constantly. There's a lot of instability out there in the financial markets, especially what's going on in Europe and to some degree in the United States as well. So it will be prudent for all members from all political parties to get a good sense of where things are as it relates to Ontario, and then decisions could be made. And I think that is a very first important step to take, and that's what the Premier has instructed the Minister of Finance. The other important point in this is that the Premier has made it clear that the Minister of Finance remain the same. Dwight Duncan, again, a sign of stability and the strong leadership that he has provided up to now, fighting through the recession.
So if things have changed, and that's, let's say that's going to impact on government revenues, if the economy doesn't grow at the same rate that you had previously forecast, if taxes don't come in at the same level, if business growth doesn't happen at the same level, then what has to change in the budget? Is it reducing expenses? Is it increasing taxes? Is it changing the timetable for balancing the budget? Because if the revenues aren't coming at the same level, one of those things has got to change.
Yeah, you know, the federal government is preparing their budget, and they had a delegation from a very smart economists, and they have different opinion on what should happen. Should we continue, you know, to work with the two other level of government and invest to stimulate the economy? We are in a pretty good shape in Canada and in Ontario, despite what Mr. Hillier is saying. I've been, you know, at a conference with the head of the European Bank, and, you know, they say, we don't know what we have done here in Canada and in Ontario, but you are doing pretty well, you know, compared to what's going on. Before, we had influence of United States and the rest of Canada. Now it's globalization. So what is happening in Greece, what is happening in Portugal, has an impact on Canada, and also other countries where they pay their worker a lot less than we do have an impact on us too. You know, jobs now are very movable. You know, they can be transferred to Mexico and to Brazil. So we have to be vigilant. Can we make a decision right now? I don't think so. I think that we have to listen to what the experts are telling us. We have to work with other level of government and see, you know, almost day by day what will be what we will be doing.
And I think that was one important point we saw when we were going through the recession and responding to the recession late 2008, 2009. Ontario was not alone. Ontario worked very closely with the federal government and municipalities as well, and that's the kind of you know, decisiveness that is required. So it's important that obviously that both Finance Minister Flaherty and Finance Minister Duncan I'm sure, are engaging in conversations, the bureaucrats, and you have to, as Madeline said, listen to the experts to better understand the situation and take the steps forward.
All right, so do you think the situation has changed since the beginning of the campaign, or are we in for a messier economic picture in Ontario than all the parties forecast at the beginning of the campaign? Because that was the message that we heard from people like Don Drummond and David Dodge during this campaign. In fact, I think David Dodge said whoever actually forms a government is going to have a bit of a mess on their hands.
Yes. Well, the only thing that's that we know for certain about the economic situation is it's full of uncertainty. Nobody has a good handle or grasp on what this trending is where it's going to take us to. So it's, but what we do know that it does limit a government's ability to respond. And in a minority position, it may limit it even more. We know that Dalton McGuinty would prefer to tax and spend out of a recession. That's without a doubt. And he doesn't really like controlling growth of government. We've seen this provincial government grow by over 80% in the same period of time that the private sector has grown by only 10% over those last number of years. So government is going to have to get some significant restraint placed on it, and the more uncertainty that's in the marketplace, the greater the restraint is going to have to be. I don't know what the Premier is going to do in that regard. I have no idea what's going to come through in this economics statement. It ought to be just a recognition of where we are and if there's been changes in the projections from this spring's budget. We don't know. There could be some new policies introduced in that. There could be some of the policies introduced back in the spring that are withdrawn. All that's unknown for.
Right.
But Mark, one thing is sure is that the politician here in Canada should not send mixed message to the investors. And we should not hear again from the Federal Minister of Finance, the worst place to invest is Ontario. So all this has an impact on the economy, has an impact on the confidence that investors have. We're not competing with other provinces. Yes, we do, but we're competing with the world. So we have to send a message that Ontario is open for business and that the best place to invest is Ontario. Because remember, if Ontario does not do well, it's 40% of the economy, Canadian economy. If Ontario does not do well, Canada is not doing well.
That's interesting that the solution during uncertain times is to take the ostrich maneuver and not say anything bad about anything truthful what's going on in the economy. Listen, worldwide investors and businesses are intelligent, they're thoughtful. Just because a politician isn't speaking and wants to bury their head in the sand and not say anything about what's going on in the economy.
But when is the Minister of Finance?
Is not going to be have that much influence. So we have to speak truthfully, we have to speak honestly, and we have to demonstrate, not just hollow words or political rhetoric. We need to speak honestly and demonstrate that indeed we are open for business, that we are a good economy to invest in.
Just because we're short on time, I want to come back to something else, which is, do you acknowledge that government spending is an issue and that needs to be controlled in some level? Or is the rate of government spending increasing too quickly in these economic times? Do you have to rein that in?
Well, I think we laid down a very prudent plan in this platform. The Premier spoke into it in terms of the restraints that we're bringing in terms of reducing the Ontario Public Service by about 7%, mostly through attrition, but that's going to result in net savings of about $500 million a year. Not to mention ensuring that we remain focused on health and care and education, because that's the other thing that I think nobody can deny we heard in the election, is that people want to make sure that the education system is there, the healthcare when we need it is there right within our community. So those type of things are important, but obviously prudence is necessary, and that's why the fall economic statement by Minister Duncan is extremely important for us to know the roadmap, where we are at and where we need to go.
But it's also very important that we be truthful. And and you're talking about the public sector cuts. 2 years ago, Dalton McGuinty said we're going to freeze public service wages, and we saw all the hidden and the not wage increases that were actually with the public sector unions, the increases in the OPP contracts. We have to be truthful and honest. And when you say a reduction in the public service, that applies strictly to the narrow sense public service, not the broader public service. The narrow public service.
So no, we're not going to cut the nurses and the doctor. We're not going to do that, and the teacher. No, and the meat inspector. We're not going to.
Forget the spin, Madeline.
Yeah.
There's 80,000 public sector employees in Ontario, but there's 1.2 million broader public sector employees that Dalton McGuinty refuses to even consider any restraint on those.
When people are getting older and we need more health care, if that's Mr. Hillier is suggesting, no, we're not going to cut the nurses, and we're not going to cut the doctor, and we're not going to cut the meat inspector and the water inspector.
On government assistance, those people need to be recognized, Madeline. 550,000 people out of work, above average unemployment rates. The only
adding to that role is not going to help.
The only province who fell from a have status to
because
a have
they come
not,
my way,
and a ballooning
as the Minister of Community and Social
Services.
A quick final point, then we have to go to a break.
Okay, the fact of the matter is, which is important to recognize, that Ontario is doing far better than other economies. Ontario is the second largest recipient of foreign direct investment, next to California in North America. And then you've got companies like Samsung, which is a multinational company investing $7 billion in Ontario. That's the kind of success stories that are important to know, because those are resulting in creating real jobs and right here in our province.
Okay, we'll talk more about green energy and a couple of other issues when we come back, as we look ahead to the new session of the Ontario Legislature following last Thursday's election. We'll be right back on Talk Ottawa.
There's more than one way to join the discussion on Talk Ottawa. Just log on to rogerstv.com, follow show listings to Talk Ottawa, and send us an email with your thoughts or ideas. We want to hear from you on Talk Ottawa, the right choice for your voice.
Welcome back to Talk Ottawa. We're talking to three local MPPs who were re-elected last week in the Ontario election: Madeleine Mayor, Yasser Naqvi, and Randy Hillier. If you've got a question or comment, give us a call at 613-728-1001. Now, earlier in the show, you talked about the green energy and that the green energy plan, and that Dalton McGuinty is going to have to climb down from that. I think that was the term you used. Let's talk about that for a minute. In your view, as Liberal MPPs, was this election an endorsement of where the province is going on green energy, or a rejection of it, given that I think depending on your perspective on the outcome of the election, you could have either view?
Well, I can tell you in my writing, there's huge support for green energy, for renewable sources of energy. My constituents want to put solar panels on their rooftops. I'm part of an energy co-op called the Ottawa Renewable Energy Cooperative, which is a result of the Green Energy Act. So there's a lot of excitement about that. I think one thing is clear: people want to make sure that the energy we're using is produced from cleaner sources. They don't want dirty coal as a source of energy. And people are excited about the jobs that are being created in our communities across the province. I mean, if you just look at Ottawa, there's thousands of jobs that are being created by companies who are installing these things, who are producing these things. And the result is that over the last 2 years, we've created about 20,000 new jobs, good paying jobs in the renewable sector, and our aim is to get to about 50,000. So it's an important part of our job creation program to ensure that Ontario is in the forefront when it comes to producing renewable energies, like producing the parts that are associated with it, like solar panels and wind turbines and poles, towers, etc.
So that's not going to change then, is what you're saying? That it's full steam ahead on this?
Yes, I mean, we ran on that. We did not climb down, so to speak, from it in our platform. It was very much part and parcel of our economic plan, and I think people have voted in support of it.
But we have seen, Yasser, and you have to recognize this, wherever there was an industrial wind turbine project proposed, the Liberals lost. Right? You even recognized it earlier last year when you put a moratorium on those industrial offshore wind turbines off the Scarborough Bluffs from the opposition. Sure, people in areas where they do not see or are not affected may be endorsing of your program because they're not aware of it. And they're not so negatively impacted. But throughout northern and rural Ontario, where those projects have been proposed, you've lost. You've lost. The people where these need to be placed are not accepting of it. And I think it's also, people are increasingly learning that, yes, these green energy jobs that you talk about, they're recognizing that there's a $180,000 a year subsidy to create them. That is money coming out of hard-working Ontario families to pay and subsidize for those green energy jobs. And we also have to, people are increasingly becoming aware, last year, Ontario paid other jurisdictions $600 million to take the power off our hands. We had to pay other jurisdictions.
This was in existence under the Tory
Madeline,
also.
You're producing more power at a time when there's nobody who wants it, and you've locked people into a 20-year contract that we have to pay exorbitant subsidies to them over 20 years to produce power when there is not a customer connected to use it.
One thing people don't want, they don't want blackout. They don't want blackout.
You have more power than we have demand. We've lost 6,000 megawatts of demand because our industry has been decimated under the Dalton McGuinty Liberals. We've lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Okay. We've got
a quick final point on that, and then I want to move on to a couple of other topics.
And so the result is, we have surplus power, and the result is that in net since 2006, Ontario has sold energy worth $1.3 billion. So we have come ahead, as opposed to before 2003, Mark. Ontario was buying energy in the cost of about $900 million.
Okay. So we'll have to stop there. We'll have to stop there on that issue. But I want to move on to a couple of other topics. And now, first of all, with regard to the platform that your government ran on, is it your view that you can now proceed with that platform because you won the election, or do you have to sit down with the other parties at some point, or do you have to moderate your platform to get the support of the opposition parties because you don't have a majority? Do you look at your platform and say it's full steam ahead now with that platform and you simply dare the opposition parties to vote it down, or do you say, you know what, we're going to have to water our wine a little bit here?
We live in a democratic province. People have, we are in a minority government, so we will have to work with the other party. But with an attitude like you see tonight, I'm not sure that we will be able to, but we will try, because Dalton McGuinty is a person of consensus and will be working with the two other leaders.
Well, where was the consensus
I
when he
hope
brought
that-
out these wind turbine projects in
Okay, I don't want to go back to the green energy
there's
issue,
been no
but
consensus.
on that point, what opportunities do you see there? Do you look at some of the platform planks of the other parties and say, well, there's an opening. We agree on that. We can work together on that. Are there opportunities like that?
There is opportunity for sure. Now we have seen, at the federal level, there was no coalition, what do you want, no trade-off.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that that's the avenue that our premier will want to follow. But we will have to work with the two other parties. And for some issue, it's probably the NDP who will support the government. Some other, it will be the Tory who will support us. So, but we are in a minority government, so we'll have to work with the other.
I agree with Madeleine, and one point is also clear that we presented a very serious plan for serious times. It's a prudent plan. Our plan, in fact, was cost the least amount of money than the Conservatives or the NDP, which is important, especially in these tough economic times, and had very specific things to help with students with their undergraduate fees at post-secondary level, with helping seniors, which is something very important, and I hear from seniors all the time, and ensuring that they continue to live in their own homes with independence and dignity. These are important things, and I, for one, and Madeleine's got a mandate to deliver on these, and we look forward to working and delivering on those.
And can we afford to deliver on all of those, even if the economic situation is changing and those growth projections are not realistic, as many economists have now said?
Well, that's why I think it's important, one, to look at where the economic ground is right now in light of the instability. But one point is clear, that our plan was the most prudent, was fully costed out by independent economists. It took very prudent projections, more prudent than what was outlined in the budget, to ensure to have some buffer room, and I think we're confident that we will be able to implement the aspects of platform.
Okay, I wanted to ask you before we run out of time, I want to come back to what you said about the appetite for change in this province, because you talk to the people in your riding. I know you hear from people across the province. If your conclusion is that people wanted more change, what were they looking for, do you think? What's your assessment of what Ontario wants?
Well, I think by and large, the greatest change that they're looking for, Mark, is absolute truthfulness and honesty in government, and a way for them to be involved in the decision making. And that's where I think the essence of the change that people had an appetite for. And they
But that's not a platform issue, right?
No, it's not necessarily a platform. It's an overarching issue. We've seen, I think, people...
You seem to be suggesting earlier that the Conservative platform should have represented more change than what it did.
I'll give you an example. We've put in the platform. It didn't get a lot of play in the media, but an assurance to people that there would be no new taxes without a clear mandate or the express consent of people. But it got very little play in the media. I don't know if anybody around this table or even anybody in the audience tonight remembers that plank in the platform.
We all remember the inmates being tied up on the Queensway.
That's what we want that people are looking for and have the appetite for, is a government that they can trust, a government that will be honest, and a government that will do what it says it's going to do, not something else once it gets in power.
All right, we'll have to leave it there, but good discussion, and there are lots of things to talk about as we look ahead to the fall session of the legislature. Do we have any sense of when it's going to actually start, if you had to guess?
Not at this time, but like as we said earlier, the Premier has asked the Minister of Finance to put together an update, so it's a fall update, so
it'll be in the
fall.
fall.
It will be before Christmas.
It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting.
Okay, well,
the only thing that holds back is that Speaker's role.
Okay, we'll stop there. Thank you all for being part of the discussion. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again next time on Talk Ottawa. Good night.